And good evening, everyone. It's John Michael Salvato, and you're watching the Inner Alchemy Live podcast. And with me tonight, I'm very excited to have somebody that many of you may remember from some of our previous shows, Dr. Terry Drew Karanen. And tonight we're going to be talking about his book. So before we get into that, I just want to remind everyone that this is a live and interactive broadcast. So that means you can be part of the conversation with me and Dr. Karanen. And the best way, the easiest way to do that is just to open up the YouTube video that you're watching us on in a separate window so that you're watching it directly from YouTube itself. And that'll give you the opportunity to be able to comment, and we should be able to see your comments on the broadcast itself. So Terry, thank you so much for coming back. You were here with us a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
on our last episode, and now we are at the point where your book is ready to launch.
Yeah.
But before we talk about that, tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired the book.
Well, first of all, I'd like to tell you just thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. New authors are appreciate all the the traction we can get with out there on social media. So thank you so much for doing this. And I had such a good time and made some new friends with the last panel that we were on. So thank you for that as well. Yeah, I've been a minister for over 30 years, and I have done counseling, and I write. This is actually my 20th book that I've published over the years, and it in a variety of different venues, shall we say. But for this particular type of book, I really have a small number of subscribers, under 1,000 probably. I just wanted to make something that would support and encourage them and be more accessible to them. Primarily because I don't have, I'm putting new blogs on the medium.com blogs spot, but I no longer have a blog page. I don't even have uh, my terrydrewkaranen.com is just for emails. I don't do a lot of that anymore because it's so much to try to do on my own, and it's gotten very, very expensive. So I've just tried to scale back a little bit in that sense. But in talking to people, they come to me for counseling, when people come to anyone for counseling, there's only four issues that they come to talk to me about and they want help with. And so that's what I write about. It's either relationships, it's wealth, health, or career and retirement. There really isn't anything else that needs to be talked about. Everything that they talk about in those four areas actually has a place or a subcategory. Because for relationships, for example, you think, oh, relationships. Well, you're immediately thinking. Most people think of romantic relationships, but it's also the relationship that we have with our bodies, the relationship that we have with our friends, our casual friends at work, which during COVID, many of us didn't have those casual friends to chit chat with, or the relationship we have with our higher power or God, or with science and anything else that we have in our life. There's a relationship that we can develop with that. So that's the way I begin to work with people and find out how I can serve them. Because really, I when I ask people why they come to me, when what we call a presenting problem, as you know, I'll say, do you want a counselor? Do you want a therapist? Do you want a mentor? Do you want a coach? And sometimes they want pieces of each of those, or they want one or the other. I know when my sister called me one time, she's 9 years younger than me, and she started talking to me. I said, wait a second, before we go too far here, do you want your minister, your religious science practitioner? Do you want your therapist? Do you want your counselor? Or do you just want your big brother? And she said,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, you're going to get all of those, but you're also going to get in it maybe a slightly different way. you know. And then I said to her, I said, well, I guess, are we talking about billable hours or you just want me?
Right on.
She
Well,
goes, really?
let's pull up the book. The book is called Making Sense of Life, Volume One, the blogs. It's available now on pre-order from Amazon.com. We're going to put this up on the screen a little bit later so folks can jot down that address because I can tell you I have so enjoyed reading the book.
Oh, thank
Um,
you so
and,
much.
and you have an advanced copy there with you, so you can
I
show
do.
everybody. And I've
All
got to tell you,
500, all 518 pages of it.
and so well worth it. I mean, it's one of those kinds of books that you don't sit down and read from cover to cover. You sit down and read, one or two passages from it, and then, at least for me, just like digest that, sit with that for a day, and
Oh,
I could see myself after I get completely through the first time using it as getting a cover copy, a hard copy of it and doing let me open up and see what source has for me today
yeah.
because
Thank you. That's exactly the way I hope people will use it. And I've written a couple of books like that where you don't have to read it from cover to cover, but sometimes you just need something and you look for something specific. But I mean, you can do that with the Bible or this book or with Mechanics Illustrator for that.
yeah.
Just open it up. It's like the drop method. You just drop it over. It's like, yep, yep, Spirit's speaking to me. So there it is.
Well, before I ask you a couple questions about a couple of my favorite passages, um, why this book now? Was there something behind inspiring you to do this now? Because you've written some incredible books, you've done and you continue to do some really amazing work. But why bring this to us at this time?
Well, recently I was in a group that our assignment, we take us an assignment each week as to something to think about and then share with the group. And the question was, how do you want to be remembered? And I retired from active pulpit ministry 5 years ago, but I've continued to write. And I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon. But my health has given me some challenges over the past 3 years. And so I teach people to live in the moment, but I found that too many of my friends have left earlier than I wanted them to be, and definitely that they wanted to be. So I began to think about how I wanted to be remembered. So this book is the first part of a legacy that I'd like to leave for other people, so that people don't have to look to find me. They can read what I've written, and they can maybe use that, and maybe not. I don't have any desire to have people believe the way I believe specifically. I've never seen it as this is the way. In religious science that we've both been involved with, and science of mind, it's never about the way, it's about a way. So we don't have the ability of saying, well, this worked for me, work for you. That's not the way therapy works. That's not the way counseling works. And that's
Not the
not the
way
way
life
life works.
works.
That's exactly.
Well, I want to jump in. I'm chomping at the bit here to jump in, and so I picked a couple of your a couple sections from
Okay.
the book that really spoke to me as I was reading it, and I'm sure there are more that some that'll speak to me even more poignantly, but I haven't gotten through all 500 pages. But these like immediately we're like, okay, I'm taking notes on this one with questions I want to ask. And so the
Okay.
first one is in your section, your uh, segment called "Equal or Special." And as a genderqueer person, I really loved this piece. I loved what it said, and I loved the concepts behind it. We just lost your camera. Are you there? Okay, we're gonna give Terry a minute to get back. And as he gets back, I'll go ahead and jump in. But I really encourage y'all to pick up a copy of this book, pre-order it now, because I know that the first printing is going to fly off the shelves. It's really, like I said, it's one of those books that several folks that I shared bits with have said, "Oh my gosh, that's just what I needed to hear today." It's one of those kinds of like really inspired feeling. Um, yes,
Sorry.
and you're back. No worries. Um,
Something
I am
something beeped on another screen, and I was trying to get rid of that screen. I accidentally got rid of the screen that we were on.
No
Sorry.
worries. So I haven't.
Uh,
I'm really good at filling in space while
Thanks.
tech problems are filled. So I'm going to go ahead. Like I said, as a genderqueer person, the equal or special segment really spoke to me, and so I'm going to read a segment. And while I do that, I'll put up on the screen the the pre-order so that folks can do that while they're listening.
Okay.
In that segment, you say uh, what we all say we want is to be equal. Fine, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason why anyone should be put down for the color of his or her skin or cultural or ethnic background, with whom one sleeps, or how old one is. The problem occurs when the group or individual who cries foul that they are being equal that they are being equally turns around and wants special accommodation. If they are equal, then why do they need something special? Does that not negate their desired equality? And I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that. You said in the beginning of the post, I think this is probably going to piss a couple of people off,
And it
but
did.
it was at least then you know you're doing your job.
Oh
If
yeah.
somebody to get pissed off, they have to think, and this will do nothing if not help people to think. So could you expand more on what the big takeaway was you wanted people to take from that particular post, from that particular segment?
I was part of the Pennsylvania Equality for the of marriage in the state in 1990s, 1994, and I was surprised at how many people, when they started about being married, they discovered that they would also, if they wanted to split up, get divorced. And I said, "Did that not occur to you?" Again, it's like, well, but we're gay. Okay, wait a minute. What are we looking at here? The part of this blog, as I remember it, was about using different pronouns for various people, and it continues to annoy a lot of older people who can't figure out why it's necessary, and the people who don't want to use the same pronouns that they grew up with. My point is on this part of this blog is that we do not get to tell others how they need to express themselves. Now, I met a woman, well, it was when I first started my first ministry in 1993. So I met Carol back then. That was 25 years or more ago. And about 3 years into our relationship, our friendship, and being part of my ministry, she announced that she was now going to be known as Marie Dulce. And she announced that she had changed her name, and she did it, and that was that. Now, she told me why. I think it was because I was one of the first persons she told, and and she was kind of trying it out. But why should I care? As long as she has the same infectious laugh when we're talking, I know it's the woman that I see in my mind. But instead of being willing to screw up, which is what happens when we're dealing with pronouns that are different than what we may be used to or use ourselves, people don't want to feel inadequate because we don't do it right the first time. And I think is that the same article that I talked about African American versus Black?
Yes.
Okay, because I was out to lunch with a group of people, and I said at that time, this is the mid '90s, and it was very much we had to say it was supposed to be not Black but African American. We had gone through Black and Afro American, and now it was America, a Black American. And so I said to one of the congregants who was Black, I said, I'm so sorry. I said African American. I should have said Black. He goes, don't worry. This is Pittsburgh. They only started calling us by that name or something else recently. I mean, that's how backward it was at that time. It doesn't matter, though, to me whether or not I talk to one person who's Black and she wants to be called Black or another person who wants to be African American. It doesn't matter to me. And it's like, okay, well, with that person, that's exactly what I'll use. It's about asking the person what works for them, not what's convenient for me, but what works for them. Along with the same attitude or the same idea of equal or special, being equal or special, Marianne Williamson refers in one of her books to the special relationships that they talk about in A Course in Miracles. And she said that something to the effect of that all of us are special, yet none of us are special. And that might sound like metaphysical psychobabble, but it's not. Because in truth, in my mind, we are all one. And yet we are all special because we're special because we get to express spirit in a unique way that no one else can. We each have a gift to give to the world. So if we're hiding our light under a bushel basket, as the scripture says, we're robbing people of the light that we could shine. Now, as far as special or equal, my question is, do people really want to be equal? Or do they want equality only when it suits them? So
Equality without responsibility.
that when really what they want is equanimity. So right now, I don't need wheelchair access to a sidewalk, but my friend does because he's differently able than I am. Equality means we get the same thing, exactly the same thing. My friend does not want to deal with a sidewalk the same way I do. He needs wheelchair access, which means a ramp of some sort. We need two different things. Putting in a ramp doesn't impact my ability to get onto the sidewalk, but now we have equal access. And we have two ways of accessing the sidewalk depending on our abilities. Have you ever seen that cartoon of the three boys, the
Yes.
small one, the
The
medium
fence.
size, yeah, the taller one? Yeah, okay. So if for those of the viewers that are watching this, if you don't know the story, it's a small guy, a medium-sized guy, and a taller guy, and they want to see over the fence to watch the baseball game. Now we won't go into why they're getting to watch it for free, but that's another story. So if we gave them all the same size box, it wouldn't necessarily help the two shorter boys.
But it would be
But
equal.
right, because if you give them three different sizes based on their height, a big one for the smaller guy, a medium-sized one for the middle guy, and a low one, like maybe just a footstool for the taller guy, they can all watch the fence. But did they get equal? No. They got three different things, but it allowed them to do the same thing, just like wheelchair access gives somebody who is differently able the ability to get onto the sidewalk easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, because I really felt, growing up at a time when we didn't have words for me as a genderqueer person, and as I got a little bit older, I was only given a binary choice. Like, you can be queer, you can be gay, or you can be trans, but there was no non-binary, and so
Yeah.
I didn't fit in. And my feeling was always that, when somebody gets married, when a woman gets married and becomes Mrs. Smith because she married Joe Smith,
Yeah.
we may forget a couple times and say, oh, this is Susan Thomas. But we forget that she's now Susan Smith or Susan Thomas Smith, but we get used to it, and we become accustomed to that. When someone changes their name, like you said, like you talked about, it may be, and I experienced that in my life, in monastic life, where I went from being my birth name, my dead name, to being Brother John Michael, which is the name that I ended up keeping with me, to then later becoming consecrated as a bishop and being Francis Maria, to coming back to John Michael. So there's still some people who occasionally say Francis, and they're like, oh, no, wait. That's fine. We all make mistakes. The president got Egypt and Mexico confused the other day. We make mistakes. It's part of the human condition.
Right.
So I really appreciated that, and I really, as someone for whom the Buddhist philosophy means a lot, that difference between equality and equanimity makes all the difference in the world. And I was going to use as an illustration of what I thought you were saying that cartoon
Oh yeah,
with the fence. So
yeah.
that's why as soon as you started to say it, I knew what you were talking about.
Well, and the same thing is true of the LGBTQI XYZ community. We've never had the exact same needs. And are we part of this community? Yes, but it's for example, I'm very involved in the past couple. Well, I've been involved with Tantra for as long as I've been a minister, and but recently I've become interested in the work of Barbara Corellis, who has Urban Tantra, and I have learned so much about Tantra from this woman, and most of my Tantra teachers have been men up until this point. But the attitude about Tantra and about opening up to a whole new way of expressing that, has really slapped me down a couple of times. It's like, wow, I never thought of it that way.
She's brilliant.
Oh, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was also very close to Louise Hay. So it's all, so it's easy for me to speak about treatment work with to Barbara.
Right. Well, the next segment of the book that I really liked was when you said the article is entitled "That's Not What I Said," and that one for me was pure gold, pure wisdom. So let's talk about it. You start off again. I'm going to go ahead and find the overlay here. You start off by sharing a story that I want to read a segment of someone getting your words all twisted, resulting in a bunch of people's panties getting in a knot, and then you share that instead. Oh, I don't have the segment bookmark there. But you shared that instead of allowing the circumstances to drag you into the drama, you remembered two helpful ways of moving through the annoyance, as you put it. So would you like to, so that folks get a little sense of some of the kind of practical wisdom that this book brings, share a little bit about those two ways to short circuit getting caught up in drama? Because I think that's something in this day
Well,
and
I
age
know
we
that
could all use.
I'm thinking about what two ways you're thinking. Oh, I see. Here we go. Okay.
I think it's
Oh,
like page 50 or 51.
yeah, the first one is Reverend Dr. Arlene Bump. She always says, I neither defend, justify, or explain my actions. I let the results speak for themselves. That's gold. The first time I heard her say that, I said, you got to write that. I got to write that down. And she's very clear about that. Because she doesn't just go into anything willy-nilly. She is very clear about that. And the most impactful point for me is that it's far less about what I am being said to have said when I probably didn't, but it's more about the other person's issues. So it's taught me once again to speak with clarity, act in clarity, and allow divine right action to unfold, however that does. And the second point was, let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, so
It's pretty brilliant, isn't it?
yeah. Well, and in writing this book, I kept coming back like, wow, I like that's really helping me right now. And that's also in going back over this was a way for me to encourage myself. There's in one of my books I write about being encouraged by something that I saw in Creative Thought magazine, and I was just really it was my first year of ministry. I was really really down, and I just was, it was as I said in my book. I said I was setting I was sitting on the floor. I didn't have a desk, and my computer was on top of this box, and that's what that was my office. And I was so down, and I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't pay the rent on the where we had the church at the hotel, and I thought, well, I can go to Creative Thought and I can read the treatments in there because ministers and practitioners would send in treatment requests and or treatments that they would write. So I flipped it open, put my hand over the end where the minister's name was or the practitioner's name was, because I thought, if this is really going to help me, then I'm going to call them. I don't care how I can pay them. I'll figure out a way. I'm going to call them and have them do a treatment work for me. So I read through the treatment. I go, wow, I got it. I got it. Let's see, who is it? Golden Triangle Church of Religious Science, Center for Positive Living, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Reverend Terry Drew Karanen. And I just laughed. I laughed because Spirit was telling me, you've got this. It is within you. Somebody else didn't write that, you did. So why, as Dr. Juanita Dunn used to say, I'd call her for treatment. And did you need to pray on this? She goes, oh, my precious child, have you forgotten who you are? And she would help me remember who I was. And that's what I try to do for other people, is to remind them how wonderful they are. In this particular case with this person who was very against me and my ministry, he just didn't believe that I could be who I was. I couldn't be a minister and be gay. I couldn't be a minister and be in a relationship with another man and call him my husband. And I just let him go. And I didn't argue with him. I didn't correct him. I didn't try to get him. It's like the old thing, can't teach a pig to sing. It annoys the pig and it doesn't work. He was not going to stop. That's the way he felt. And that's okay. He didn't have to come to my church. That's fine too. Is this the same one? I don't have it open anymore. Is this the same one where I had a congregant that was angry at me because I couldn't help with the project?
No.
Okay, because this one comes back too. Someone was dealing with a project that we had at a church, and I told them that he wanted my help with it. And I said, I cannot do this. There are other people that will help you. I'll help you find them. And I will not be able to do it. It's just not on my plate to do right now. I can't help you with this, but let's find who will. So it came off fine, but they came storming into my office one day and started about, you didn't do this and you didn't do this and you should have helped me and blah, 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 blah. And I go, it all went out fine. And I said, wait a minute. I told you that I didn't have the time to do this. I told you that I wouldn't be able to help you. And I tried to help you find somebody who would, and they did. So now you're coming back and complaining because I told you I couldn't help you and I didn't. And so now you're mad. And he said, yes. I said, okay, well, at least we're clear.
And that really diffuses that. I love the quote from Arlene Bump, because and I as soon as I read it in her voice,
Yeah.
because I think of that so often, when the fiery little Sicilian in me wants to smack somebody's stupidity down, and then I realize that and hear her voice and say, I don't owe them an explanation. And the other side of that is they don't owe me an explanation for their stupidity or their ignorance. Most of
Right.
the time when I get irritated, it's for their stupidity, not their ignorance. But when you do that, it just diffuses all of the tension in that moment. And for me, it's been a new experience when somebody says or does something that's stupid, or they didn't read what I wrote, and they put words in my mouth and get their panties in a twist. To simply say, okay. And that's all you do. Okay.
You know,
That's
it's just it's a lack of ego
yeah,
that you have to be. You don't have to be. I find it helpful to be the adult in the room sometimes, and that's not putting me above anyone. But there are times when you have to say, okay. I mean, that's the way when you're learning to deal with confrontation, when you're learning to deal with difficult people. Some of the best ways to move through the problem or the issue that's going on is being willing to agree with them. You may be right. In fact, that has stopped a couple of conversations. Well, yeah, you have to do this. You have to do this. I go, wow, I hadn't thought about that way. You may be right, and that's it.
yeah.
It's
Um,
pretty.
I'm mindful of the time. I'm mindful that we've already gone over 30 minutes. I'm not surprised. Do you have time to? Can I keep you for another 5 or 7 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. Thank you.
fantastic. Because there's one more that I thought would be the best way to wrap this up, because folks hear from me all the time, and we don't get to hear from you all that often. And hopefully, this will make you feel so good that we do get together and have lunch very soon. Not that
Yes.
I'm guilting you in the least, but at least I put it out there in public.
Yeah.
um,
Thank you.
so this was one of another favorite of mine, and pretty poignant. You talk about in an article that's called "My CV of Mistakes," um,
Mm.
which just like hit me like it hit me and then envelops me in a blanket, and it's just what I
Mm.
needed at that moment.
Right.
I felt seen and heard, and um, I wanted to be able to ask you to share with our viewers, why do we need to go there? What powerful transformation awaits us when we are able to look at our CV of mistakes and not see them as something shameful, not see them as something embarrassing, but lean into them and own them. I was telling somebody the other night that I felt like the solution to in the current political climate, um, every time we hear about Biden being too old, I share the concerns about having an octogenarian in office, but it's better than the Mango Menace. And I feel like he ought to and I think he has started to just lean into that. Say, yeah, I am old. Do you want? I was watching a news program the other night where they said it's a choice between who's going to fly the plane. Are you going to have Scully, who managed to land that plane, or are you going to be like and I apologize, I don't know whether it was Airport or one of those
Yeah.
movies where there was a lunatic who
Yeah.
was just going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
send everyone to die.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's really something that, again, because you and I share this philosophy that life is always reflecting back to us the next lesson.
Yeah.
And I read your post, and then I saw this on the news. I was like, okay, that's it. That's going in. That's going into the questions. Um, what is that transformation that awaits us when we lean into our CV of mistakes?
Well, I think first of all, your question of why do we need to go there, and my answer to that is no one has to go there. Now, I choose to because it's by questioning my motives and making course corrections that I move forward in life. Um, we avoid mistakes, problems, and issues. And for people in the New Thought movement, some of those words aren't even allowed. Now, Ernest Holmes never avoided using those words. What he taught us is that we don't deny that they exist on the human plane, but he tells us we deny their necessity to continue. And Jesus said, you must be perfect as your Father is perfect. That may seem unattainable on the human realm, but it's not. But to do so, again, we have to give up our ego. And that's not often easy, especially if you're white and heterosexual and male, because we've been taught from infancy that you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. You can't show emotion. You can't ask for help. There's only room for one at the top, as if there has to be a top anyway instead of a circular organization of some kind. You can only talk to other guys about sports, how much you make, the next car you bought or want to buy, all the sex you're having, which is usually a fantasy. And then all you want to do really is have your best friend hold you in the biggest bear hug that he can muster and tell you that you've got this and he'll be beside you. That is, if the guy has a best friend, since most men don't. So that's why I offered my CV of mistakes. It was as a guide to help people create their own. I listed my top 5. There are more, but that's not all I did. I didn't just say, oh, these are all the mistakes I made. These are what's happened. I didn't stop there. I went on to show how I overcame each of those issues and moved on. Now, you may not have any of those issues. The other readers may not have any of those issues, and that's fine. But seeing how one person overcame something might make something else click within you. But what I received back was scathing emails from other ministers about that posting. And do you know why? Because they don't share themselves with the people in their congregation or their churches. Now, I'm not saying you have to tell your congregation or your clients, for God's sake, everything in detail, but to put ourselves out there as if we don't have any problem in the world, I think is nonsense. I mean, from your, do you know the acronym for FINE? I'm fine. Yeah. I'm fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Now, none of my teachers allowed me in my training to ever be fine. They pulled me up out of the muck to the magnificence that I was at that time. And if we can't acknowledge our mistakes, which often means making amends, which is also treacherous for many, then we're going to stay stuck. Because that's what people like to do. They like to stay stuck in the mud, in the muck. It's okay to be in manure up to your, as Grandma used to say, be a manure up to your neck, because it's warm and eventually you get used to the smell. And unfortunately, that's why people stay in relationships that are abusive and which are marriages that are good enough marriages, instead of finding what they really want, which is the life they want to have with themselves and with someone who respects who they are.
There's a mic drop moment. I'm still stunned by the realization that you had practitioners and ministers angry about that. But I
Oh,
get it. I
I
understand.
was on a listserv at I won't say which church, but I was on a listserv. You can't tell people that. You can't tell people this. It's like,
Yeah, there's no shortage of spiritual bypassing, even among ministers and counselors and coaches.
no, there isn't. I mean, and I used to tell people, I wouldn't say it necessarily this way. I will in your show because I have a potty mouth sometimes. But basically what I was told, this is how I screwed up this week and this is how Spirit got me out of it. That's what my talk was every Sunday.
I think I wanna thank you as a way of wrapping this up. You just made it easier because I don't work scripted and I don't I just have notes on the questions I want to ask you. And I thought I'll know when it's the right way to express my thanks. And two things come to mind. One is like on the CV of mistakes.
Mhm.
I appreciated that you're sharing your story, and you're not just sharing your story like, oh, poor me. You're sharing your story and sharing the solutions, the potentiality that exists for all of us. And you're not saying, here, I want you to go on this journey and take my baggage with you. We pack our own bags when we go on our journey.
Yeah.
And our bags may have different stuff in them. And some of those bags might be stuff that's easily dispensed with, and others are like the shaving cream that exploded in the plane, and it's all over your socks and your shoes and your shirts.
Mhm.
And you got to figure that out,
Yeah.
and we do. But I really appreciated too a lot of the folks who watch this show are practitioners of one kind or another, spiritual or coaches or people who practice divination. And so often in my sessions with them, I try to share with them the importance of storytelling and ask their permission to tell my story, not because my story is better or worse or I'm proud of the fact that I got through it. None of that stuff really matters because we're focused on what they came to the session for, what they brought to the table. But the moment that they hear I'm not perfect, I still struggle, I still have my moments, my dark nights of the soul, then they realize they're in safe space. And your book puts on in every article that I read so far, and I'm up to the like late 300s on page wise. Every article creates a safe space. So I want to encourage everybody who's out
Thank you
here
so
to go
much.
ahead and get the book. I'm going to go ahead and put the pre-order link up there again. But I want to thank you so very much for this book. I think it's definitely I'm already looking forward to volume two. No pressure, but already I know it's in you. So
Well,
I'm
there's actually four that I have planned. We'll see
ooh
how this works out.
yeah
Would you like a preview?
yeah
Well, volume two is going to be just special day blogs, blogs that I wrote for a specific time or a specific holiday, or something like that, and other writings that'll include newspapers and magazine and articles that I wrote in different places, and some of my poetry. The third volume will be all of my talks, seminars, and courses. So transcripts of my many talks over 30 years, what I've done with workshops and special courses that are designed and presented. And then the fourth volume will be how to pray and be heard. And that's actually going to combine a full part of the 6-week course I just taught on spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer that Ernest Holmes taught us. And along with that, then will be several hundred of the treatments that I've created and published. That 6-week course, however, is also available on my YouTube channel, which I think you have the link tree um, uh, up there at some point, but that'll give you my YouTube channel. That is available as well as the 4-part series that I just completed in January on the basics of science of mind. So there's over 200 different videos on there. There's a wonderful 10-part series called Conversations that I had with Helen King. And she's just amazing. She's in her 90s and she's very spiritual in her aspect and being very clear on spirit. But those are all free. There are over 200 videos of various types that are on there, and there's no charge because, like Ernest Holmes said, I never had an original thought. But hopefully, it sounds like with this book, I thank you so much for that. That's the best compliment I can be given is that it made you feel safe and that it somehow spoke to you. So thank you so much. I appreciate that so much, you, Michael.
Thank you for living the noblesse oblige. That's all I
Mhm.
could say is, to whom much is given, much is expected, and you have certainly kept your share of that bargain with all of us. Terry, Drew, Karanen, folks, Karanen, folks. I got through the entire show to the last minute. Terry Drew Karanen
Are
was,
forgiven.
was our guest tonight, and I'm really grateful. Look forward to seeing you for lunch real soon, and look forward to
Yes.
hearing from all of you. You can go ahead and keep the conversation going in the comments on the YouTube channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode. And by which time I should have learned how to read. um, Thanks so much. Thanks, Terry, and love all of you. Have a great week.